If I say anything incorrect and you know better, don't hesitate to yell out at me. Okay, yeah, so we're going to play with blocks. Presenting Gutenberg Editor. When I was wondering why the heck they did this, and I went and found their manifesto, or their mission statement, the idea is to make it easier to make rich content rather than just straight text with a photo thrown in here and there, without having to know a lot of stuff about behind the scenes, messing with HTML, all that other kind of stuff that goes on with the current editor. They wanted to make it easier for regular users to be able to get in there and do some more interesting layouts and better content. Part of that is, like I said earlier, in response to what they're seeing from Wix and Weebly and Squarespace, and other is because it's good from an SEO standpoint. The richer your content, the better your SEO juice.
I'm sorry, what are rich posts?
Rich posts would be anything that's not just a bunch of text. Okay, people engage better with graphics and with photographs and with video and audio, and anything you can add to it beyond just straight text is good. So this is the classic editor that everybody knows and loves, and this is what it looks like right now. It seems pretty basic, but all of these down here are meta boxes, and each one of them opens up to be more and more and more stuff that you can mess around with. It gets quite distracting and a little bit confusing at times. The new block editor is a lot cleaner. I can kind of go back and forth, go from there to there. It's a bit sleeker, a newer look than the older one, just based on today's design standards. And normally, actually, the custom fields thing isn't even showing, and all this is pretty easy to turn on and off. So let's go with a kind of a quick overview of where everything went. So right now, when you get into the block editor, you're going to notice first thing is that there's this new editing toolbar across the top that has tools that you're not used to seeing right now. The plus sign is called the inserter, and it is how you add new blocks to the page. It's one of the ways you add new blocks to the page. It has undo and redo, your usual key commands, whether it's Command or Control Z, and Command or Control Shift Z to undo and redo. Those work. I think they've always worked, but now there's buttons there. This is kind of a handy tool, the info, so you can find out how many words you have, headings, paragraphs, and blocks. It's a good way to have an idea of how much work you've done. If you have a goal to set, you have to have, you're writing a 500-word article or whatever, you have an idea of that without having to copy and paste into Word and use its, word counter. This is a good way to move up and down through the blocks because as we are building with blocks now, everything is basically a big long stack of bricks, and the longer your post gets or your page gets, actually the more this thing becomes useful because you can kind of slide down to a specific place in your page or your post just by using this navigation tool. Settings turns a lot of things on and off. It's also, it turns on the page specific settings and the block specific settings, and then this handles all that other stuff that was showing up at the bottom of the classic editors, kind of hidden behind this menu, the three dots there. And when you click on the more tools, what you get is a few more things that handle your view. So one is to take this top toolbar here and add to it things like bold, italic, underline, centering, and all that kind of stuff right into this toolbar. Or you can have them right at the block that you're working with. So it depends on which way you prefer to work and whether you're distracted by having all of those tools follow you down the page, or if you just want them always to be in the same place right at the top of the page. Spotlight mode, by default, what it looks like when you're looking at the back end is all of your blocks are the same, the same level of opacity. They all look like you're working on all of them at the same time, when in truth you're only working on one at a time. So when you turn on spotlight mode, all but the one you're selected on will fade back a little bit. So it makes it very obvious which of the blocks you're interacting with. And that's really helpful when you're, not so much when you're editing in the content itself, but when you're messing around with the block level controls on the right-hand column, having the one that you're working on actually highlighted helps you make sure that you're affecting the right block as you're changing settings and whatnot. And then full screen mode is like the current distraction-free mode, basically makes everything go away other than the actual entry fields. Code editor is what you're used to seeing if you ever look at the classic editor, you would have it's visual and text now. Is that what it is? Or visual and HTML? But when you click on the text one, you see all the HTML behind the page. Code editor does the same thing. A little disconcertingly, it also shows you all the tags that are making the block editor stuff work. So you're going to see what look like HTML comments, and that's what's making the block editor work. Reusable blocks is an interesting thing in that you can design something that you know you're going to want to use over and over again. It could be a call to action. It could be something that invites people to sign up for a newsletter or whatever. You could build it once, save it as a reusable block, and then be able to insert it into your pages and posts wherever you like, much the same way some of the page builders work these days. There are a ton of keyboard shortcuts. I didn't bother bringing it up because it wouldn't even fit on the screen. It would be like 3 columns of stuff. So if you're a keyboard driver rather than a mouse driver, you'll love the fact that there are a ton of ways to get around without taking your hands off the keyboard. Copy all content is kind of self-explanatory, and the options brings this up, which lets you turn the different panels on and off and that kind of stuff. So obviously, if you still find it cluttered, maybe you're writing posts, maybe your blog doesn't use tags at all, so there's no point in having that meta box showing up in the sidebar at all. So you can just, you just go here and shut that off. Or you're not doing custom crafted excerpts. You're letting WordPress do it. You can shut that stuff off so it's out of your way. So this is what the current classic editor sidebar looks like. Everybody is probably familiar with it. This one's with the page. This is with posts. Now the block editor sidebar looks like this. So where like the permalink currently on the classic editor is right below the title of the page, it's now moved over here to the side. You can write your excerpt over here rather than where it was showing up right under the content well, or right, it was the main editor, the TinyMC. I'm gonna keep looking at you because you know what I'm talking about. Right, so all of this stuff is the same basic stuff. It just moved around a little bit. Click up here to choose block, and you get different settings here on the right hand side. So in this case, I clicked on an image. It gave me a place to put in the alt text, which is nice. You don't have to go into the way it is now where you get into a totally different modal. It's right there on the side. Change the size of the image, change the dimensions, whatnot, that kind of thing. So this is what it looks like in total. And what I have here is the usual WordPress default sample page. And it was mentioned earlier, this says classic, right? Because it was brought in from a pre-Gutenberg site. It comes in as one block that says classic. And you can change it. I'm sorry, that's classic. You can change it just by going to this block here and choosing convert to blocks. And this is an animated GIF that should be playing, but it's not. And what it does is it turns it into a whole bunch. Oh, here we go. Here's the animated version. Yeah. Each one of those paragraphs became its own block. And if you notice, as I'm clicking through this thing, the toolbar is following along with me down the page. That's what I was saying, where you can have it stay with the block, or you can freeze it to the top of the screen and not have it follow you down the screen like this.
So this is the snapshot view, is that what they called it?
What do you mean?
Rather than well, in the options you showed it all stays at top or it follows you down the page.
Right, yeah, so this is the one where it follows it down the page, right, yeah. Oops.
Do you have to individually convert your posts just like this, or can it be batch?
I think so. I've never seen anything about batch press, but somebody may have written something that does that. No, I couldn't tell you. Worth looking at. So there are a ton of blocks, and like I said, the goal is to make it easier to create rich content. So rather than relying on the user to figure out how to do things like bullet lists or buttons or embed audio or video, make a gallery. I know the gallery's not hard, but quotes and Polk quotes and all that kind of stuff, you have to understand what's going on in the TinyMCE toolbar and where to use those things. And some things that exist now simply don't exist in TinyMC, like columns. Columns are actually pretty handy to have. I'll show you an example of that in a little while. And then the inserter is your friend. I was going to do more slides about this, but I realized I'm just going to do it as a demo anyway, so there's no point. But basically that's it. When you hover over that thing, it invites you to add a block. The block editor keeps track of which blocks you use the most often and offers those to you first, because there are some that you're going to use all the time, like paragraphs, and other ones you won't use all that often, like Polk quotes or whatever. So I am going to go, here. All right, so what I did earlier today was I made this site, and for some reason, it's all about ducks. Actually, you know what? I need to log into the back end of this thing. So, all right. So let's go to that again, and I'll show you how I built this page. All right, so I am not I'm not a big fan of ducks, but I happened to get a package of duck images in email today, so I used them. So here it is in the editor, and what you have is me clicking with the wrong side again. I should just do this, and there we go. I'm just going to do that. All right, so this is the title block, and it's going to always set that first one at the top of the screen is always going to be your title, as you would expect. This is a paragraph block, and the way these work is kind of interesting because if I go to the end of Fascination with Ducks and hit enter, it actually creates a new paragraph block. You can see as I hover over it, it goes from this one to this one. So every single paragraph is its own block, which at first blush seems a little weird, but it's actually pretty handy because I can treat every paragraph differently like I did here. These are both paragraph blocks, but the yellow one, I went over on the right hand side, the block specific tools came up. It knows I'm in a paragraph. I told it to make it smaller. I told it to add a drop cap, and I changed the background and foreground colors because you can do that now without having to mess around with HTML or anything. What else did it do? Let me go back down here.
And the rainbow circle will give you...
The rainbow circle will give you the full-on... Oops, Dave, click with the other finger. There you go. You know, the usual color picker. So if I want to make it really hideous, I could do that, and it's easy enough to do.
And now you can use the undo too.
And I could use the undo. There you go. Do you want to come up? You can do this. Probably better than me,
No.
right? And then see. Well, I'm going to scroll down and show you columns. So this is a columns block. So I'm going to go in here, show you how that happened. Hit Add Block. I'm going to go scroll down a bit till I get to Layout Elements, and here's columns. So it drops it in, and by default it's 2 columns. But if I click in the block, again on the right hand side, the block specific stuff comes up, and I can change this to up to 6 columns if you really want to make your reader's eyes go crossed. This would work pretty well, I would assume, on a very large, wide layout. But the cool thing about this is it's not just text. You can drop anything in any one of these columns. That's what I did here. I dropped in an image, and I have text in these other 2. So if I go in and click plus, and I can throw in a quote, ducks are neat. Somebody, wait. Hey Dave, there we go. Okay, so now I have a new quote in there, and if I preview what I have, there's my one column with the quote in it, which actually brings up something else interesting. If you want to do something like this, being able to drop in a 4-column layout and drop one module in and have all that space is a pretty neat way to kind of maybe a little bit hacky way, but a kind of a neat way to have that, you know, varied layout without knowing anything about writing a bunch of HTML. If I go in here and change to, I got to go back to selecting this block and, you know, remove one of the, or one, maybe do 2 of those. There you go. So it's easy as adding and removing them. This is a image block, like the one you're used to using now. You go and pick out any picture you like and put it in there.
A question about that column.
Columns, yes.
Feature.
Uh-huh.
So if the user was on a mobile device that was narrower,
It-
is there any way to?
It stacks them.
Oh, it does.
Yeah, it does stack them. It doesn't have any way to reverse the order of the stack yet, but it will stack them. So the reversing the order of the stack comes in handy if you're doing a product page, say, and you have 2 columns of text and then a product image. Well, that works fine on your wide layout. But say on mobile, you want them to see the product image first and then the two things. You can't do that right now with Gutenberg. They may do that, you know, be able to change the sort order based on the size of the device that people are using, and I'm expecting they will, but it doesn't do that yet. So.
Can I ask another column question?
Yeah.
If you have a 4-column, can you like have different column widths?
You can't have different column widths yet, and you can't affect, that's kind of an important thing, you can't affect any of this padding directly in the block editor. It would have to be done in CSS, or it would have to be part of the theme. So somebody might write a theme where it looks at this, looks at the underlying HTML, and let's see. Oh, thanks. You know, these are. If I don't know if you guys can see any of this, or well, first of all, do you know how I got? Do you know how I got that thing? Let me back up. All right. In Chrome, really in any browser, you're going to have the ability to see the code behind things. Okay, so I'm just right-clicking and choose Inspect, and now it's showing me directly that paragraph. What I did is I clicked on this, and it says, if you can't see it, it says has-3-columns. So if you know CSS, you would just write a rule for the has-3-columns class and tell it, I want my padding to be 4 pixels instead of 20, or whatever they have right now. That's something that a theme author could do, or that you could do if you know what you're doing with CSS. So anyway, let's go back to editing this.
Currently, which theme are you using to this guy?
This is 2019.
It's 2019.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I wanted to go just bare bones what WordPress comes with.
Just wanted to make sure what it was.
Yeah. Yes.
So in the past, 2017, I've used I know there's a plugins question, but I've used site origin widgets bundle to kind of get the components in the editor.
Yeah.
It seems like now I only need that because this editor by default has.
True. But a cool thing is that I'm going to go down here and add a block, and you can add a widget. So if I wanted to add a latest post widget right here in line with this particular post, I could do that. So your SiteGround widgets should be available here. Any plugin you load that adds widgets, whether it's Gravity Forms or whatever, WooCommerce, whatever, you should be able to add it as a component in the page itself, which is not something you could do right now easy at all. Yeah, you can if you really know what you're doing, but it's not an easy thing to do. So anyway, going back to, okay, so this was the image we talked about. Okay, so there are actually 2 different kinds of doing quotes. One is, this is a block quote, if you're familiar with the way WordPress handles it, but it's kind of cool because it knows that a quote should have not only some place to have the text, but also to have a citation. So if I add a new one of those things, you'll see, can you see that it says right citation in light gray there? All right, and then it automatically handles the John the Southpaw. It automatically handles the formatting so that your site is smaller and not as obvious as the main quote. This is your usual gallery tool. Works the same way as what you're used to now. When you click this, it brings up this thing, and all that dragging and dropping and whatnot still works the way it always did. There's a list module, which is handy because, I don't know about you guys, oftentimes when my clients are writing a list, they don't think about using bullets. They just do paragraph after paragraph after paragraph, and that's bad from not only from a reading standpoint, because where'd the bullets go, but also Google and other search engines understand when a list is a list, and it's treated differently semantically than a paragraph is. So doing it correctly is actually to your benefit, and they made it easy because they created a list block. The cover block is interesting. I was playing around, I was changing the theme. This is the way the 2019 handles it. You choose your image and you type in the text you want, and it lays it out like that with a little bit of a overlay on the image. But when I loaded like 2017, which doesn't know the block editor, it didn't do that. It dropped the text below the image just like you would expect it to do, in old school WordPress. Kind of cool that I can change the overlay color on the image. I can change the opacity of it. Right? If I turn on fixed background, I'm going to preview that. The ducks should stay in place while the text goes by. There it is. Okay, so that's kind of handy. All right. This is a different kind of quote. This is a Polk quote. It's obviously meant to be a lot more, prevalent on the page. Let's see. Go down here and take a look at it. Where'd it go? There you go. Yes, I actually did look up Toulouse-Lautrec duck quote just for you guys.
Yeah, there's someone that doesn't like ducks.
I know, right? Yeah, well, I got into it. I'm like, well, this is silly as hell. I'm just going to keep going. And I found a duck haiku. So there's a duck haiku. Now, the point of the verse block is to be free-form text. Do whatever you want with it with no constraints. And I was able to do that here. Just a bunch of spaces and silliness like that. But, you know, try to be all artsy with my duck haiku.
So you can put 27 spaces and it stays so.
Yeah, I'm assuming it throws out a whole bunch of non-breaking spaces in. But, yes. Now, if you want to do text and image next to each other, you don't have to use the 2-column thing. There's actual a media and text block, which I have going on here. And, oh, look at that. Here's the stack on mobile button, which I'm assuming means that I know that the columns do stack when you go to mobile, but apparently this one wouldn't. It would probably just squeeze down until it was teeny. So there's a I didn't even know that. There you go, stack on mobile. So that's kind of handy. All the same color settings apply. And then when it comes to embeds, there are a ton of purpose-built embeds. So this happens to be a duck-themed Instagram. This is coming directly from an Instagram feed. But if I wanted to do, say, you mentioned you're one of you is doing a lot of media. You're doing a lot of media, right? On your like video and stuff. That was you? Yeah. So I don't know where you got the stuff, if you got it on outside services, but this list goes on and on and on and on. And it's pretty handy to be able to add stuff from a whole bunch of different services without having to worry about using their code generator, bring it in. All you should really have to do is give it a URL and it'll handle it all for you. Adding buttons is very easy now. Just throw it in there. You've got the same color, the same color controls that you have otherwise. Let's see if I can get, there you go.
Is that a button block?
It is a button block, yes. Again, you can put it in a column alongside a picture or whatever you want to do. And I don't think you can add any more content to it. It's just about the button. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Oh, there you go. Change it to an outline button and change it to a squared button. There you go. Okay, so that's really basically it. Now there are more blocks, but I don't think I need to run through every single one of them for you. Those are basically the main ones, and then there are, like I said in that slide earlier, there are a ton more, but these are the ones that I really thought are the ones people are going to use the most. But I think once you get in and start playing around with it, it gets pretty self-explanatory. The most important thing to remember is that when you are working on any one block, you're going to have the content itself, which is all this stuff in here. You've got some controls here, okay, like add to reusable blocks, that kind of stuff. There's the trash can to get rid of the block. And then you also have the controls over here on the side. Let's see here. And then this is the top toolbar in place up here versus following along with as I go. I told you about spotlight mode, so you'll see them light up as I click on them, which is kind of handy, right? Oops.
Question.
Yeah.
What was that type with the image with the text going?
I'm sorry, which one?
The image with the text going over it.
Oh yeah, that was cover block.
Cover block.
Right. So let's try this. Right now we know that it works with this theme because it's 2019 and it's written to work with that theme. But out of curiosity, I'm going to go and change the theme to, I don't know, 2017. Okay, so it did. It's still fixed, which makes sense. It's the CSS thing. But notice that this is different now. This Polk Quote is no longer pretty. I'm sorry, this verse block is no longer pretty. Now it looks like a code block. Yeah, in general, it's just not as nice. I know I changed the color of this duck button, and it doesn't seem to have applied for some reason. So that's why you want to check your site when you switch over to Gutenberg. What happened here?
Can you create templates for these blocks consistently?
I'm sorry, can you what?
Can you create templates out of these?
Yeah, right. So let's go to this one here, and
For the whole page.
oh, for the whole page. No, it's not because it's not a templating engine like you would have with a page builder. Are you saying like say you liked this layout, you want to use it over and over again, just with different content? To be honest with you, you'd have to install a duplicating plugin. There's like duplicate post and that kind of thing. I would just duplicate it and change the content because there's no way to save the entire layout as one giant block. You can save each one of these as a separate block, but that kind of defeats the purpose of, or it doesn't really do what you want it to do to have the whole page all at once.
So like the 3 column, you could add that to reusable blocks.
Right.
And if you then added it, it would be a 3 column, but all 3 columns would be blank, waiting for content. Right?
Well, let's find out. So I have that. I'm gonna hit to add to reusable blocks. Okay. Give it a name. All right, and then let's just go add new. Sure, why not? I went to, here's reusable now, that it added that down there since I now have one to use. It apparently the 3 columns thing doesn't work. Well, I'm glad I don't have to answer for the demo breaking. Let's try one that's not the 3 columns. Maybe it doesn't like that. Fine, whatever.
I've seen the tutorials where they created a block and they went to the link below the reusable block saying manage blocks. And once you go in there, it looks like just a regular post. And then you can add blocks inside that. And when you reuse that, it becomes like a whole page with all the blocks you added afterwards.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Wow. Well, there you go. Talk to her. I don't know what I'm talking about. Yeah. Okay. Well, that's good to know.
Yeah,
See.
can you do blocks inside of blocks? It sounds like you can.
That's surprising. You can have blocks inside of blocks, is what it worked out to
Well,
be.
you initially create a reusable block and it's just one block. But when you go into that manage blocks, it becomes looks like a regular post. Where
Okay.
you can add more blocks.
Oh, okay. All right. So I created this one.
Okay.
If I click edit, that's just that. Okay. So now I want to go to.
Add a reusable block.
All right. Oops. There. Yeah, there's no way. Yeah, they're saved. They're saved as
Right
this
where
one.
it says manage.
Manage.
Reusable block. And then click on one of those and you can add more blocks inside them.
Oh, I see. Put 3 more columns then.
I guess it's a hack right now. I don't know if they're gonna keep it. That's
Yeah, I wonder what that does to the markup.
it was
So now that I've done that, if I go back to the post that had the yellow paragraph block in it, is it going to be? Is it global?
Will it have,
It's not.
Maybe a new one.
yeah.
Yeah, maybe if I add the yellow one again. All right, let's do that. It did. Well, yeah, it did. Add it to the bottom.
If you want to use it on a page where you don't want to, where you want to change the blocks,
Yeah.
you can convert it back to
Yeah,
non-reusable blocks.
Yeah, I saw that. There's oops, here. Convert to regular block. Oops, convert to regular block. Okay. That's that seems like a good way to get in trouble. Nesting and nesting and nesting and
How do you
nesting.
move blocks around within?
Oh, when you hover over it to the left, you get that little hand.
Oh,
Or you can just click the up and down arrows.
Yeah, right. You can do that if you want to move them one at a time, like that. Yeah, there you go. Now tell me about ducks is way at the top, right? And this is that list of stuff here. I think.
All the different kinds of blocks.
Yeah. That's interesting. This is now looks like this on the back end because I changed the theme.